Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the ROS Media channel and welcome to our Saturday morning webinar. It is 10 a.m. UK time. I've been looking in the chat and we've got people from all over the world on today. We've got hello from Spain. We've got hello from the UK. We've got Quebec. We have got Colorado. We've got France. We've got Canada, Hungary, Thailand. So guys, welcome to the webinar. Really excited to share with you the content today, which is the Monopoly Game Changer Protocol, how to really solve the cost of living crisis. Everybody is struggling right now, let's be fair. And that's a real shame, you know, that people are struggling, trying to make ends meet, trying to provide for their family. I think what you're going to learn today is going to change that forever. So I'm really excited to break this down. If you joined us yesterday, Ian and I broke down how this works in real technical detail, giving you documented a straight line process of how this all works. Today, we're going to dive into more of the what, where, why, and just the overall situation that people find themselves in and how to fix that. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to the webinar. My name's Andy Benson. I'm in charge of the media platform here at the Republic of Old Souls. I'm joined with my good friend, Ian Clifford, who is not only the founder and the president of the Republic of Old Souls, but is also the strategic lead behind these protocols as well. And Ian's going to break it all down for you today. So welcome to the channel again, Ian. I'm excited to deliver this one today with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's fundamental that our community really gets a very good level of comprehension on what's on offer here, because it really is life-changing. And you know, after many years of development, I'm excited to showcase it for new people who are on the webinar today. I don't think you'll find anything similar to this available anywhere in the world. It's pretty unique. We recently ran a webinar and somebody in the comments said that it deserves to win the Nobel Prize. So I'll let you judge that when we get, you know, as we go through it. I'll let you judge whether you think this is a candidate for the Nobel Prize. I was a bit flattered, but given how much work's been put into it, it was a nice accolade to have from somebody. So
no, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, guys, we're going to run through the presentation with you, and Ian will break that down. We've also, as you can see, we've got live chat today, which is amazing. So if you're joining us, please let us know where you're coming from. Please let us know that you can hear us. And we're going to be running a poll today as well. So we've got a live poll that we can run just to get some feedback from you guys on the content. We've also got a bunch of handouts as well. So we've got some technical papers and handouts. They will all be available after the webinar in the members area. So if you're brand new to this, I would encourage you to make sure that you can then go to the members area. The recording of the webinar will be available once it's populated, and we'll get that onto the platform for you guys as well. So you can rewatch it if you need to, if there's bits that you missed, and all the handouts will be there too. But for now, Ian, over to you. Let's get started.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. Before we get into you know, the contents of this presentation, I'm going to be very open and very transparent. If you Google my name, which I'm sure a lot of you will, or look on your whatever search engine you're looking on, or whatever AI system you might be using, you're going to get pages and pages of propaganda about me, and it's just like something I've had to live with for many years, since around about 2010, following my whistleblowing about a very substantial banking fraud that was going on in the United Kingdom. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but just a very, very high level. My financial services firm, one that I've grown from nothing up to the third largest of its kind in the UK, was targeted by the British establishment, was taken out of the game. I was made a scapegoat. I blew the whistle on how the banks had been asset grabbing, is the terminology, taking customer assets. All of the banks in the UK at the highest level were involved in it, all the way up to the Bank of England, the Treasury, the regulators that then were called the Financial Services Authority. And since then, it's a very, very long story. They destroyed every one of my ventures. They can't destroy this one, by the way. And they've made me into, if you look on the internet or look on AI, the profile that you'll get of me is that I'm an idiot. I am a practicing pseudo law. I'm a free man on the land. And I'm also, worse than that, allegedly I'm a fraudster. So I want to put that out up front, because if you are interested in what we're offering and how we do it and why we do it, I just want you to know that there's a lot of propaganda, and I want you all to realize that the reason for that propaganda is because when I set my mind on getting a job done, we get the job done. And a lot of people in my career, I'm 60 years of age, I've been doing these things for 42 years. Many people across my career have praised me for my ability to create solutions to very complex problems. I've done many things in my career that are similar to what I'm going to present to you today. Back in the day, before all the propaganda, I won awards. I was revered by many in the financial services industry as being one of the brightest minds and the guy that you would go to if you had a complex problem to solve. But that's many years ago. Since then, there's been like a war of attrition going on, because they're trying to stop my voice and they're trying to stop me bringing my remedies and solutions. They can't stop this, and you'll see why as we go through. But just to frame that and make sure that I wanted you all to hear that from me, because I am very proud of my career. I am very proud of what we're doing here. We have a very big plan. What we're going to show you today is a stepping stone towards our plan. That's the Republic of Old Souls plan, which is a freedom community, an independent sovereign nation that has its own infrastructure, that is financed from donations from our envoys and members, that comes from something called signature credit recoupment, which is a central theme in what we're going to look at today. I've been working on this for many years. We have a very large team. If you're not aware of how large we are, we have in excess of 50 full-time people working on this project. We have people working in multiple countries. We have a very dedicated team. And probably most importantly, we have a track record that everything I'm going to discuss with you today and show you, we can prove to you it works, and it has already worked. So there's nothing I'm going to show you today that's blue sky thinking, theory, nice to have, if only we could get it to work. Everything I'm going to show you today, we can show you that it does work with verified results. So that's the sort of framing of it. I wanted to put that out there first, Andy, because lots of people on the webinar won't know the backstory. You and I have done many interviews about the backstory. You and I have done interviews about the Freedom Plan. We've done interviews about all of the components of what we're going to talk about today. But many of the audience won't have seen all of those things. So there's lots of content that I'm sure people will want to go and look at when they've when we've gone through this presentation. So let's move it on, shall we?
Absolutely.
So this is our roadmap chapters, really, of this presentation. There's some very good questions at the end, so do try and stick around to the end, because there are some very, very good questions that have come in. And I have presented aspects of this presentation many times, but I decided to bring it all together into under one roof, if you like. So this is a consolidation. it is the foundation of 3 protocols brought together that I believe, and many others believe, will solve just about every single problem that people are encountering with, with the cost of living crisis, with wrestling with debts, with wrestling with taxes, things of that nature. All of those problems can peacefully be solved with what I'm going to show you today. The reason why the member who commented about the Nobel Prize said it was a candidate for the Nobel Prize is because behind the scenes, it is pretty complicated. Andy and I did an interview yesterday, and I outlined it like watching a play. You might see 3 or 4 actors on the stage acting out a play, but behind the curtain, you've got a whole crew of others doing different things, from makeup to lighting to scene setting to all sorts of other things going on in the background. And what a lot of people don't realize is when you bring a solution like this that I'm going to show you today, there's a lot going on in the background that people don't realize because they don't see all the moving parts in the background. And I think the guy who said this is a candidate for the Nobel Prize must have been involved in developing projects of this type and knows how much work goes into it, how much research goes into it, how much coordination, how many people are involved, how many moving parts there are, etc. So if you haven't worked on big projects before, you probably won't know how much work goes in. If you have worked on big projects before and you've been the project director or the architect or even the manager, you'll know also that there's a lot that goes in. So I want you to look at this from the lens of what can it do for you, but I also want you to look at it from the lens of how much is being put into this over many years to bring this to you. This is the product of many, many years of research, of trial and error, of pilot schemes to bring this to you. It's not just been thought up, last week and we've created a presentation. This is many, many years, a lot of effort, a lot of energy has been put into this. And in my humble opinion, this is a very sophisticated solution to a very complex problem that you can access very, very easily. So I've made the complex simple, and that's one of the one of the objectives and one of the challenges is how do you make the complex simple? How do you facilitate it so that those that are interested in taking it up and enrolling with it can actually do it in the most simplest of ways possible? And that's something I learned many, many years ago in my financial services organizations. You've got to make the complex simple, and you've got to make it simple as possible for people to enroll in it and actually enjoy the outcome from it. So we're going to talk about some technical stuff. I'm not going to go too deep because I know that most in the audience will be new to some of the information that I'm going to talk about. Maybe you're new to all of it. You can't go too deep too early with very technical stuff. So I'm going to try and keep it fairly high level. If you want technical, technical is what I do, by the way. So there's between 50 and 80 technical papers at Ecclesia Law Institute that breaks all this down. Andy and I have done interviews breaking it down individually into component parts. There's an enormous amount of content if that's what you resonate with or you want to see. And I'm also, we're very, very close to launching the Ian Clifford avatar. It's just being beta tested at the moment. So this is an avatar where you will be able to ask it questions about any of the subjects that I'm going to talk about today. And if it does what it's designed to do, it will give you the same answer that I would give you. And you can ask it questions about anything that we offer, anything that we're doing, why it works, how it works. And later on, if you do enroll, you'll be able to ask a similar avatar what is going on with the your structure, your plan, your protocols that you're enrolling in. It will tell you exactly where you are in the build out of the protocols that you're interested in. So it's pretty technology driven now in the world that we're in. Didn't used to be when I first started, but we are using a lot of technology to bring this and make this possible. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at what is the problem. And I'm sure a lot on this webinar are experiencing problems, which is probably why you're here. If you're not here because you've got a problem and you just want to have a look and see what we're doing, that's okay. But we noticed that a lot of our members and envoys of Republic of Old Souls, they start looking at potential solutions because they're experiencing problems, because they're experiencing stress in their world. And in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many others, there is a crisis looming. There's no doubt at all. There's the beginnings of World War III going on. The economics of the world is under stress. People are feeling the pinch with regards to the cost of living crisis. You've got an engineered crisis, really, because every crisis that's ever been in the financial world is all engineered. One of the things I learned a long time ago is there's nothing random that's going on. It's all engineered. And if you really want to know why would there be an engineered crisis, if you're not up to speed with the fact that there is UN Agenda 2030, which predominantly is there to bring in more and more control of the world population. How are they going to achieve control? Well, it's pretty simple to say it. It's not as simple to do it, but they are bringing in like a digital concentration camp, which means that your ability to navigate around what I call the monopoly board of commerce will be constrained by whether you are operating with your behavior in a way that doesn't impinge on your ability to use your bank accounts, to visit places, to travel places. There is a massive control agenda that's being rolled out individually, and the way that they're going to get a lot of the world population to want to go into scenarios that give the controllers more control is by creating crisis, is by creating distress, and then rolling out the solution. So it's problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, create a world economic crisis, roll out the solution, which is more digital control over your game of Monopoly. And then people will say, yeah, I want that solution because that may solve my problem. But actually what it's doing is it's giving those that control the game board, the Monopoly game board, it gives them more control over what people do, and more importantly, how they do it. Because if you can't use your bank account or your debit card or your credit card or however you make your transactions without permission and without sign off from others, the controllers, that's how they get control. And if you're wondering, is this like some prediction and there's no substance to it? It's already going on in China. It was going on in Canada a few years ago when the truckers went on a protest, and that's how they disbanded the protest, by stopping all their banking, creating control mechanisms through just switching people's bank accounts off. That's the extreme end of the spectrum, and we're not seeing it yet, but it's my prediction it will come for ultimate control. What we're experiencing at the moment is basically a cost of living crisis, where the cost of everything is going up and people's revenues, what they bring in, is not going up in line with the costs going out. So the gap between what's coming in and what's going out is getting narrower, and in some cases the gap is actually negative. There is less coming in than going out in many households, and that is causing a great deal of distress. There's the amount of people that are getting into mortgage foreclosure, debt foreclosures, seizures, all these types of consequences is rising in nearly every country. And as I say, it's all by design. So let's just, before we move off what the crisis is, I want to start just introducing a concept, try and make it a little bit easier to comprehend the rest of this presentation. If you're brand new to this subject, you probably are unaware that there is two realms that we're all involved in without sometimes knowing that we're involved in them. There is the realm of the living and the realm of the artificial. The realm of the living is the living men and women that have got a soul, they've got consciousness, they've got energy, and they can make their own decisions. They can do, what they want when they want to do it within certain parameters. And then you've got the world of the artificial. And the artificial world, I call the monopoly board. And the monopoly board is made up of the person, the citizen. This is the birth certificate construct. It's made up of an artificial entity playing a player piece on the monopoly board. The living man, woman, the soul, the consciousness, is the agent for the player piece that plays the game of Monopoly. The living man, woman is the agent for the monopoly board playing piece, which many people will know as the person or the citizen. It is an artificial construct. Everything on this monopoly board is artificial. You can't take it to dinner. You can't give it a call. You can't send it a message and expect to get a reply, because it is an artificial construct. Everything on the monopoly board is artificial. It lacks substance, but it is how the entire world of commerce works. So you have the real, which is the living men and women, which is where the energy is. And then you have the artificial. You have companies, you have trusts, you have the person, you have the governments, you have everything on that monopoly board operating in an artificial construct, as artificial constructs. So if you can visualize that you're sitting at a monopoly board, you're sitting at a table with a monopoly board on it, and you're playing a game of Monopoly. The player is the living man, woman. The player piece is the person, the birth certificate construct. That's the piece that you're moving around the board. The living man, woman cannot step on the monopoly board because it's artificial. You can't step on it because it's like a hologram. You can't put your foot on it. You can't put your hand on it and feel it because it is an artificial construct. It's next level genius how this monopoly board game has been devised over many, many centuries. And the reason why Monopoly, the game itself, came out in over 100 years ago is because they're actually showing everybody that's what you're doing. You're actually playing a game of Monopoly. There are consequences for not playing it very well. If you're not playing Monopoly very well, you can go to jail, because the agent is equally as responsible for the player piece. If you're not playing the game of Monopoly very well, you might get into difficulty with your finances. You might get into difficulty with all sorts of things. And it may not be because you're not playing it very well. It may be because it's not a very fair game. There's a lot of unfairness on the artificial Monopoly board. And some people prosper, and some people fail, and some people have dire consequences. And all of those consequences come back to the living man, woman, because the living man, woman, under the law of agency, is responsible as the surety, as the underwriter for everything that is going on this artificial game of Monopoly. So there's a lot of ideologies out in the world. I've written research papers on them. many people have a whole range of belief systems on how you can break free from the monopoly board, how you can control the monopoly board, how you can control the player piece, the citizen, the birth certificate construct. Many of them are going in the right direction. A lot of them are incomplete, and a lot of them are very ill thought out because they don't really understand how the game of Monopoly works. I've written research papers that you can find at Ecclesia Law, which is how to win the Monopoly game. And there's another paper called Winning at Monopoly. So if you haven't seen those, I would suggest that if you want to really get your head round how this Monopoly game works, you could read those, and they may even be in the handouts. But these are all foundation knowledge blocks. Often what happens is people want to dive in at the technical end of something without really getting the foundation blocks in place. I've always found it's best to have the foundation blocks of knowledge before you move into the more technical. So I'm starting it very, very easily. I'm starting it very high level because I believe that that's the best way to get your head round and start to comprehend what we're going to be talking about as we go through the remainder of the presentation. Next slide. So staying on the theme of the Monopoly board, if you like, it's a legal grid. It's a digital legal grid. So everything on the Monopoly board is pretty much controlled digitally these days. Every banking transaction, every court case, every government legislation, it's all pretty much controlled electronically, digitally, and there's a huge amount of information sharing going on the Monopoly board. Lots of computer systems, lots of databases, lots of information that is being tracked and traced already, and has been for many, many years. The player piece, as I say, the birth certificate construct. Now, if you're very new to this subject, if you can lay your hands on the birth certificate and take a look at it, you'll notice three things about it. The first thing you'll notice is that there is a reference number on the certificate itself. That reference number is like the incorporation number for a company. You'll also notice that it will have a date of registration on the face of the document. And that date is often, in nearly every case, I've only seen one where it's the same date that you were born. So if you look at the certificate that your mum and dad gave you, or you've got it somewhere, you'll find that the date of registration is not the day you were born. And then the last thing, which is significant, is that the name on the birth certificate, the family name, the surname, nearly everybody, including me, will go around holding themselves out as if that name is the name that they go by. The name that they are, it is them, that name is them. So if somebody says, what is your name? And you say, my name is Brown, Smith, Jones, whatever, that is actually inaccurate because the name is not the surname or the family name. That name is registered to the state. When the birth certificate construct is registered, and all birth certificate constructs are registered, like everything else that's registered, the entity that it's registered to becomes pretty much the controller of it and has what's called legal title over it. So those that run the Monopoly board have all of the citizens, the birth certificate constructs, the person registered to the Monopoly board under the control of those that run the Monopoly board. The living men and women use the player piece to play the game of Monopoly, don't really have ultimate control of it because it's registered to the state. And this is very, very deliberate. Again, the state uses the law of agency to trap the living men and women to become responsible for whatever the player piece, the body corporate construct, birth certificate entity does on the Monopoly board. So if you think of it like a company, The birth certificate construct is like a company. It's not real, it's an artificial construct, but the shareholder of the company is generally responsible with the directors for the conduct of the company. In the context of the player piece, the living man woman is responsible for the conduct of the birth certificate construct, the person, the citizen that is playing this artificial game. The control of the player piece is actually with the state ultimately, because it's registered to them. Just like the car, the house, and everything else on the Monopoly board is registered to the state. And that means that they have ultimate control over the player piece or the artificial construct, which is on this artificial Monopoly board. And the trick and the trap is that most people, including me in my earlier years, I used to firmly believe that the name on the birth certificate was me. I used to believe that the name on the bank card was me. I used to believe that the name on the passport was actually me. But in reality, that name is a name for the birth certificate construct, which is registered to the state, that I can use to play the game of Monopoly. When I use the player piece, I'm using it as its agent. And the agent is responsible for everything the player piece does without ultimate control of the player piece. Because the ultimate control of the player piece, the way it starts off with the birth certificate registration, is with the state. It's with those that control the Monopoly board. So that's a little bit of framework, which is important because, as I said earlier, I have to build this up gradually so that everybody gets on the same page as we move through this presentation. Next slide. Identity versus capacity. So this is, again, to go back over this because it is so fundamentally important. The citizen, which is often referred to as the person, is often referred to in legal contexts as the person. If you read legal documents, if you read contracts, you'll see that it says the person. It will talk about the person. It'll talk about, and you may believe that the person is the living man woman, but it isn't. The person is the player piece on the Monopoly board, which is being moved round the Monopoly board largely by the energy of the living man woman. And the trap, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is agency. The agency is the big trap that many people are not comprehending. A lot of people out there are saying things like, the birth certificate construct is not me. I don't have to play this game of Monopoly. I'm a living man woman. Therefore, they can't force me to do anything because I am not that birth certificate construct. Any problems the birth certificate construct is experiencing are not my problems. That's what a lot of people are saying and believing. And the reason why they believe that is because there's a lot of ideologies out there that are missing the irrefutable truth that the living man woman, from the moment the birth certificate construct is registered, becomes the agent for the birth certificate construct itself. And you can't easily sever that agency. So the living man woman, whether they like it or not, is underwriting the conduct of the birth certificate construct. And there are ways to clean that up, and we'll come back to that later on. But you can't sever the tie. It's near impossible to sever that tie. And I'm going to show you why you don't want to sever that tie, because it actually can be extremely helpful for the Monopoly game changer that we're talking about today. You actually want to be the agent for the birth certificate construct. There's a very good reason why you want that, and I'll explain that as we go through. Next slide. Now, one thing that has surprised me, significantly surprised me when I first started researching this over 10 years ago, is that the entire Monopoly board itself is acting and operating in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, a lot of people will find that really difficult for them to comprehend. What does that really mean? Surely these countries like the America and China and Russia, surely they have endless wealth, don't they? How can they all be operating in bankruptcy and all the other countries operating in bankruptcy? It's so fundamental to comprehend this, because if you don't comprehend this, most of the things I'm going to tell you from here on in won't really make a lot of sense. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on this because it is so fundamental. If you go all the way back to when banking became a popular part of commerce, because banks didn't always used to exist, banks used to have actual physical reserves. They used to have gold as a physical reserve. And if you wanted to transact with paper, that's like notes or coins, your notes were based on physical reserves held in the banks. That system hasn't been around for over 100 years. The system that came into being from 1933 up to 1944, when it was gradually being introduced, is the system of, it's called usufruct. It's a complex word, but it basically means that an artificial system is now taken over from a substance-based system. So whereas money used to be backed by gold, it's no longer backed by gold. It is backed by human energy. And we're going to come back to this theme all the way through this presentation. In 1933, the United States, which is that operates as the world reserve currency, the dollar being the world reserve currency, the United States is the center of the monopoly board. This artificial game is pretty much being controlled by the United States. You have, in the world of banking, you have the International Monetary Fund at the very top of the pyramid. Underneath that, you have the Bank for International Settlements. Then you have all of the central banks. Then you have the clearing banks. You have the investment banks. You have other types of banks which aren't really banks, but they call themselves banks. There's a whole pyramid that's going on in the world of banking. Now, in 1933, the bankers wanted ultimate control of the monopoly board. So they introduced, because the bankers were the creditors to the governments at the time and were absolutely the creditors, meaning that they had lent money to the United States government, they could invoke a Chapter 11 bankruptcy over the United States. If you want to read about it, it's called House Joint Resolution 192. The actual bankruptcy speech was read out by James Traficant, the senator for Ohio, who read out that it was the biggest reorganization in history. It is still the biggest reorganization in history. The bankruptcy of the United States then led to the bankruptcy of every other nation on the planet. There are no nations on the planet that are not operating in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, what does that mean to you or I? If all of the governments are ultimately operating in bankruptcy, then there has to be, if you understand basic accounting, there is creditors and there are debtors. In a bankruptcy, there are creditors who are owed money and there are debtors who owe the money. So what they did in 1933, because bankers wanted ultimate control of the monopoly board, is they took a mortgage out over the entire monopoly board, all of the assets on the monopoly board, all the land, all the properties, all the infrastructure, everything on the monopoly board that has got an artificial title, because land and property and infrastructure have titles, so like contractual titles, and they took a mortgage out over all of that. And then what is of most significance to our presentation today is they took a mortgage out over the energy of the people. So I'm just going to let that sink in for a moment, because you might be wondering, how do bankers take out a mortgage over the energy of the people? And as we go through the rest of the presentation, I'll explain to you how they did it and how they're still doing it today. And they're doing it every moment of every day. And they're doing it to you on every single banking transaction you're involved in now and all of the past banking transactions. It'll become clearer as we go through. So what we're all using now is what's called money of account. Now, there's no substance to it at all. If you take out a banknote, you'll see on the banknote it says promise to pay the bearer. So that is a promise to pay in the future. You actually can't make a payment today. It's impossible to pay anything. All you can do is issue a promise to pay in the future. And that's come about since 1933. House Joint Resolution 192. So what they did was they took a mortgage out, the bankers took a mortgage out over the entire Monopoly Board, all of the infrastructure, all of the land, property, everything, every government, everything. And in exchange for that, they gave the people who they'd also taken a mortgage out. By the way, the birth certificate construct is registered to the state. They took a mortgage out over all the birth certificate constructs. So you've got this two realms. Remember, you have the living realm, the substance, the living men and women, consciousness, energy. And then you have the artificial monopoly board, where everything on the artificial monopoly board is mortgaged to those that run the board. The creditors, being the big banking pyramid, has got that mortgage out over everything on the monopoly board. Now, in a bankruptcy, there has to be a bankruptcy trustee. So you've got debtors on one side and you've got creditors on the other side. And in the middle, between the debtors and the debtors meaning they owe money and the creditors meaning they are owed money, is a bankruptcy trustee. And the bankruptcy trustee of the entire monopoly board, this artificial construct, is the United States Treasury. And that will become very important as we go through the rest of the presentation. So just to recap, there is no money of substance. There is only promises to pay in the future. There is debtors and creditors. Everything on the monopoly board is bankrupt, meaning it is all in debt. The world money system is a debt-based system. There is no substance to it. It's all made up of promises. You can't pay anything because there's no money of substance to pay it with on the artificial monopoly board. There is the creditors who are owed money. Let's just call it money for now. And there are debtors who owe the money. And I'm going to ask a question before you go any further, because it will become relevant later. I want you to think about, what is the value of world debt? If you don't know, there are different figures flowing around, but I'm going to tell you it's something in the region of $400 trillion. Looking at the latest reports from the International Monetary Fund. That doesn't include very technical things called derivative contracts that would put it into the quadrillions. If you just look at world debt, if it's around $400 trillion, ask yourself the question, who is that $400 trillion owed to? I'll give you the answer. It's owed to you and me and Andy and everybody else, all the living men and women. Because what they've done is they've taken out a mortgage over our energy, and we, the creditors, we, the living men and women, are owed that energy back. That energy that I'm talking about is what is referred to as world debt. It's a debt-based system. It's based on a mortgage over the people's energy. Everything on the monopoly board is artificial. There is no money of substance. There are only promises to pay in the future, and all of those promises to pay in the future are backed by human energy. And the human energy is an asset that is owed back to the people. The world debt is owed back to the people. Next slide. So HJR 192 is so pivotal because that is the tipping point of when the world of the Monopoly board went from a substance-based game of Monopoly to an artificial game backed by the human energy that is being transferred to the Monopoly board by banking transactions. Every banking transaction you've ever engaged in, whether it's a bank payment, whether it's getting a mortgage, getting a credit card, getting a loan, all of those transactions, even debit card, credit card transactions, you are in effect transferring your human energy onto the board, onto this Monopoly board, through a banking transaction. And that's all come about because of HJR 192, because they're using that energy to finance the board, which is all bankrupt, and they have the mortgage over the energy of the people that enables them to do it. Now, you might be thinking, how is this going to help you if you're experiencing problems with the cost of living crisis? Well, I've always believed that if you really want to prosper from something, you've got to understand how it works. So as I'm building this up gradually, I'm hoping that this framework is becoming more and more clear, because if it is, what I'm going to tell you in the middle of this presentation and going towards the latter end of the presentation should make sense. Next slide. Okay, so let's have a look at how did they take a mortgage out over the energy of the people? What is the mechanism that transfers the human energy onto this artificial construct of the Monopoly board? And how does it work? Well, here's how it works. When you open a bank account, it is not the bank account for the living man or woman, it's the bank account for the birth certificate construct. The birth certificate construct is a banker, which might surprise a lot of you on this webinar. If you look at the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, it confirms in that act that a person is a banker. And remember, a person is an artificial construct. It is the birth certificate construct. So the banker has opened a bank account with a bank. Both the birth certificate construct and the bank are artificial constructs on the Monopoly board. When you make a bank payment, what you're actually doing is issuing a new promise to pay to another bank. So you as a banker, or you representing a banker as its agent, because remember the birth certificate construct is the artificial entity, you the living as the agent for the birth certificate construct, makes a promise to pay in the future. That promise to pay in the future you would call, or many would call, a bank payment or a bank transaction. What you're actually doing is issuing new energy onto the board. The bank account that you've got with the bank, whichever the bank is known as the clearing bank. They enable you to put new energy on the board, make a promise to pay in the future. You're not transferring existing money because there is no money to transfer. What you're doing is you're making a promise to pay in the future as a banker, and it's what's called a negotiable instrument that you're issuing without knowing it. Every bank payment is the issuance of a new negotiable instrument. If you go in to get a mortgage, a credit card, or a loan, they will ask you to sign a document or a contract, whether it's electronic signature, whether it's a paper signature, it's a signature. And that signature is the issuance of a new negotiable instrument. So when you get $1 million mortgage, the bank has nothing to lend. What they do is they get you to use your signature to make a deposit of energy. So you sign the mortgage contract, the loan contract, the credit card contract, and you are giving the bank your signature, which triggers the creation of an energy transfer onto the Monopoly board. You make a deposit of energy when you sign up for a mortgage, a credit card, or a loan. When you make a bank payment, you are depositing your energy into another account, whichever the account is that you are, in inverted commas, paying, making the transaction out to. Every one of these transactions is the deposit of human energy onto the Monopoly board. The world debt clock goes up and up and up on every single new deposit of energy onto the board. If you look at the world debt clock, go on the internet, search world debt clock, you will see that the number spirals up. The value of world debt is going up and up and up and up, never ever comes down. That's because it's representative of all of those deposits of human energy onto the Monopoly board. So you are, remember, your substance, your energy comes from substance, human, living man, woman. The birth certificate construct is a banker. The banker issues promises to pay in the future. Those promises to pay in the future are negotiable instruments. The negotiable instruments are basically credit energy that you've transferred onto the Monopoly board. And you're doing it because the birth certificate construct is this banking entity as confirmed under the Bills of Exchange Act. Your signature is the mechanism that transfers the energy onto the Monopoly board. Once it goes on the Monopoly board, in nearly every scenario, that energy, that credit energy, gets abandoned and it stays on the Monopoly board. But it doesn't need to. We'll come back to that as we go through. Next slide. Now, we get into what is also very fundamental to comprehend. All of the banks on the Monopoly board, this artificial construct, are operating as nominees for the true creditors. So let me break down what I mean by that. The living man woman is the agent for the birth certificate construct. The birth certificate construct is a banker that is issuing these negotiable instruments, depositing energy into bank accounts, depositing energy into getting mortgages, loans, and credit cards. The banks have nothing at all to lend. In fact, if you look at a bank's charter, you will read in there that it's actually not permitted to lend its own money. All it can do is convert deposits into what we call money, which is actually currency. And they do it because they are operating under the guise of a nominee. So when you look at the word nominee, and if you put the etymology of the word nominee, a nominee is a fiduciary or a trustee. So what you're actually doing when you open a bank account, get a mortgage, loan, or credit card, is you are appointing a trustee or a fiduciary, somebody else to look after your energy. And that is what the banks do. All of the banks, the clearing banks, all the big well-known bank names are operating as nominees for the living men and women. The living men and women are the agent for the birth certificate construct. The birth certificate construct is a banker that issues promises to pay that are converted into currency by the nominees being the banks. Nominee is extremely important in this presentation. Only banks can operate to convert credit energy into currency. It's only the banks that can do this. This was part of House Joint Resolution 192. It's also part of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, and many other components that make it possible for banks to take in a promise to pay in the future as a deposit and convert that deposit into currency. It's not money because it has no substance. Remember, it's what they call in the technical terminology for it is money of account. Why money of account? Because it's an accounting ledger. That's why. Every time you make a promise to pay in the future, sign up for a credit card loan or a mortgage, make a bank transaction, you are then ultimately abandoning the credit energy that you put on the monopoly board, because nobody has ever explained, and they're not likely to, how you can recoup the equal to the credit energy. I'll say equal to it because you're not actually going to be recouping the credit energy itself. I'm going to show you how that mechanism works later. But if you think, I want you now to think from the age of 18, how much credit energy have you put on the monopoly board? What is the value of your bank transactions that you've spent? Money that's left your account. It's used common language. Transfers out of your account. Mortgage face values. The value of credit cards and loans. Add all that together from the age of 18. That is how much credit energy you've put on the monopoly board. And by the way, that's how much you can recoup. As we get towards the back end of the presentation, I'll be explaining to you how that mechanism works. Next slide. So if you have ever wondered, because many of you, I'm sure, haven't really had the experiences that I've had working with investment banks. Back in my financial services career, I did many projects with investment banks. Now, many people who don't have a concept of what they're doing, it's like a black box. They're like magicians that work in the money system, and only those that work inside the banks probably understand what they're all doing. There are lots of investment banks, and they are predominantly in New York. In and around Wall Street is where you'll find most of the head offices of the investment banks. When you unpack what is it that these guys are really doing, and how is it that they are so big and so powerful? What is their purpose? When you ask that question, and then you start looking into what they do, it'll become clearer that what they're really doing is they are ultimately trading human energy. Now, they probably wouldn't like to be described that way, but in reality, that's what it is. Because we've established in the early part of this webinar that there is no money of substance. There's only money of account, which is backed by human energy. So everything that the investment banks are doing is trading human energy, because human energy is what we all call money. So when they trade human energy, because, and this will also surprise a lot of people, all of the banks are also bankrupt. Because of House Joint Resolution 192, the banks are all bankrupt. They're all debtors to the system, to the monopoly board, the controllers of the monopoly board. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I could do a whole 2-hour webinar on how that part of it works. I just want you to comprehend that the banks are debtors. And because they're debtors to the under House Joint Resolution 192, when they use human energy for their trading, they have to pay taxes on the use of the human energy. And they pay taxes to the United States Treasury. Why? Because the United States Treasury is the bankruptcy trustee for the entire monopoly board. Now, one thing that may not have become clear is that when you make a bank payment, when you get a mortgage, loan, or credit card, you are depositing your energy onto the Monopoly board, and the clearing bank that is enabled that conversion of your energy into currency, they put that up into these financial structures called bonds. They're like investment structures, and they sell them to the investment banks. It's called securitization. And those securitizations are absolutely enormous. They run into trillions of dollars. And it's the investment banks that trade those securitizations. So that's what I mean by the investment banks are trading human energy. You make a bank payment, you get a mortgage loan or credit card, that energy that you've transferred onto the board is then moved from the clearing bank into an investment structure, into a bond structure, and then moved into the investment banks who purchase it and then trade it for profit. And when they make a profit on that human energy, they have to pay taxes for the use of the human energy to the United States Treasury. And there is a specific tax ledger that all of the investment banks pay the taxes. It's called the 945 tax ledger or tax module. And on the screen here, you've got some of the values of how much tax the investment banks are paying on the 945 tax ledgers. This is their annual tax bill that they have volunteered to pay under Form 945 or Ledger or Module 945. Now, if you look at all the other taxes that the investment banks are paying on other tax modules, it's a great deal more significant than this. It runs into billions of dollars. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Next slide. So the remedy to the cost of living crisis, to being able to discharge debts, to be able to discharge tax liabilities, is the recoupment of the credit energy. So what we're going to talk about now is how does that actually work? And then we're going to talk about why it works. I wrote a document many months ago called the Clifford Protocol. You'll have it in the handout. You can also find it on the Ecclesia Law Institute, and it steps out the process from A through Z of how to recoup credit energy. And I named it the Clifford Protocol because it is a through Z process. I gave it the name that I use, Clifford, and that's why it's called the Clifford Protocol. What it's doing, in essence, to make it very simple for this presentation, the investment banks that we've just seen on the previous slide are paying taxes to the United States Treasury for the use of your energy. So think of all the bank payments, mortgages, loans, credit cards that you may have had since the age of 18. The investment banks are using that to trade with it, and they have to pay taxes on it. But all of those taxes that the investment banks are paying to the United States Treasury actually belong to you because you are the originator of that credit energy. So just dwell on that for a moment. How much energy have you put on the Monopoly board since the age of 18? Let's imagine now a world that you can get that credit energy back. You're not going to get it back from the bank. You're not going to get it back from the investment bank, not the bank that you did the transaction with, and not the investment bank. You're going to get it back as a tax recoupment from the United States Treasury, because the taxes belong to you, not to the United States Treasury. Remember, they are the bankruptcy trustee for the creditors. The living men and women who transferred their human energy onto the Monopoly board are the creditors. So the United States Treasury, when they're collecting taxes from the investment banks, those taxes belong to the creditors. The creditors are the living men and women. So imagine all of that credit energy you put on the board, and imagine how much tax is being paid on that credit energy. by the investment banks. And then now imagine that you can recoup that tax because it's rightfully yours, and you can do it every year in repeatable cycles. That is the remedy that I'm going to outline a little bit more as we go through the rest of the slides. Next slide. So I said to you I'd explain how you do it. Well, you're not going to call the United States Treasury up and say, hey, you're holding on to my taxes, can I have them? That's not going to work. So you have to have a methodology. The very first step of the process is to put a new player piece on the artificial monopoly board. That new player piece is called a 98 series International Grantor Trust. It is operating as a nominee for you. You are living man, woman, the beneficiary of this trust. It is issued by the United States Treasury. It has a reference number, a tax reference number, but it operates as an international grantor trust. It has a special position on the Monopoly board. It's pretty unique in how it works on the Monopoly board. So on the board, you have the artificial construct of the person. Remember, the citizen, the person is this artificial construct that sits on the Monopoly board. You're using that day by day to play the game of Monopoly. What you're going to do if you want to recoup your signature credit, taxes, tax rebates, is to put a new player piece on the Monopoly board. That new player piece is a 98 series International Grantor Trust. The trust is a true nominee operating for the benefit of the creditor. The creditor is the living man, woman, you as the living man, woman. The trust itself, being an artificial construct, needs a trustee, and you're going to be appointing a professional trust organization called MLITR Research that qualifies with the United States Treasury as a trustee for this particular type of international grantor trust. You're going to employ in this process a professional tax filing license holder. It's what's known as an ERO, an electronic reporting officer, a tax professional that is going to file tax returns and tax documents or tax returns through electronic preparer software straight to the United States Treasury. So you have a trust. The trust has a professional trustee. The trust itself is a nominee for you, the living man, woman, and you have also employed a tax professional that is going to file all the various tax returns to the United States Treasury to recoup the taxes that have been paid to the United States Treasury by the investment banks, and those taxes belong to the 98 series International Grantor Trust. So it's a redirection of taxes. That's how this system works. The living man, woman is the beneficiary of the 98 series International Grantor Trust, but different from being the agent for the birth certificate construct, the living man, woman is now a beneficiary of the 98 series International Grantor Trust, but doesn't have the constraints of the agency. It can receive the benefit in that trust, but it doesn't have the liability of being the agent for the trust, because the living man, woman is the agent for the birth certificate construct that issued all of those promises to pay in the future to put the energy on the board. To take it off the board, you need a new entity, but the new entity is the 98 series International Grantor Trust, operating as a nominee for you, the living man or woman. Now, the 98 series International Grantor Trust operates individually, independently, and doesn't have to report taxes. It is a exempt entity in terms of tax disclosures or any tax payments. It's pretty unique as a structure. Next slide, please. So let's now walk through the process of recoupment of taxes. All of those taxes that are owed back to you now, it could be many millions that you are owed in tax recoupment right today. The first is that our system will find the linkage between when you put the energy on the board through the artificial construct of the person by issuing those promises to pay, those negotiable instruments. What may surprise you is that every bank payment, every mortgage, every loan, every credit card, the United States Treasury has a system that tracks it. Doesn't matter how far back you go, if it was a digital transaction, the United States Treasury is tracking it. Our system also tracks it. We have developed an AI-based system that can track the deposit of signature energy onto the monopoly board, no matter which bank you used for bank payments, for mortgages, loans, or credit cards, and doesn't matter which country you're in, our system will be able to identify the deposit of the credit energy, its linkage to the investment banks, and then the linkage from the investment banks to their tax modules, where they're paying the taxes against for the use of your energy. So that is the recognition stage. Our system tracks all of that, can identify it all. Now you move into what's called original issue discount, OID. Every deposit you make on the monopoly board goes on the monopoly board with a zero valuation. Why? Because it's credit energy. Remember, there's no substance in this game of Monopoly. You put your energy on the board at zero. Your energy bundled up into securities that's then traded in securitizations has a very high future value. The investment banks use the credit energy and they pay taxes under what's called original issue discount. They are using that energy. It has a high future value and it has a current value at issuance, or the issuance value, not the current value. The issuance value is zero. The gap between the future value and the value of the deposit when it was first put on the monopoly board is very wide. The difference between the future value and the value at the outset at origination is what generates the taxes, withheld taxes, that the investment banks are paying on their tax modules, and in specifically the 945 tax module. So our system will track every aspect of the movement of your credit energy in the same way as the United States Treasury IRS system tracks it. Our system will know the clearing bank, will know the investment bank, will know the tax modules, will know all the securitizations. It will track all of that down, and it will identify that when the 98 series grantor trust, through the tax filing professional, files the 1099 OID to recoup that, or to change the status of the nominee. So the bank, the investment bank's currently operating as the nominee, but we're going to be moving that nominee status to the 98 series grantor trust. When the tax preparer sends electronic 1099 OIDs to the United States Treasury, it moves the nominee status to the 98 series grantor trust, which then entitles it to the recoupment of the taxes which the investment bank has paid to the United States Treasury. It's a redirection of those taxes. And it's all done through algorithmic systems. Our system integrating with the IRS's system, all done algorithmically, electronically with computers. Next slide. So if you're interested in, is this lawful and how does it hang together, in terms of the legislation that enables what I've just been speaking about and what I've just outlined, I haven't put everything here. I've just put the big ones, right? The Bills of Exchange Act 1882. In that act, it tells you that a negotiable instrument basically is credit energy. And it also tells you that the person is a banker. The person is the artificial birth certificate construct. In UCC Article 3, it governs the transfer of the credit energy from the clearing bank to the investment banks. And it also defines who the nominee is in every transaction. The holder in due course. So that is at the moment unless you're already doing this and have already recouped your taxes, the banks, and specifically the investment banks, are presuming to hold what's called the holder in due course status. They presume that they are the rightful owners of that credit energy. When you set up a 98 series grant or trust and the tax preparer files 1099 OID, it changes that presumption. Now the 98 series grant or trust is the holder in due course of the credit energy and is entitled to the recoupment of the taxes that the United States Treasury has collected from the existing presumed holder in due course, which is the investment bank. So filing the 1099 OID is a pivotal move because it changes who the nominee is. What structure is now the nominee for the credit energy? It's no longer the investment bank, it is the 98 series international grant or trust. Where does it confirm that? Well, it confirms that in the IRS publication 1212. So you can read about it in IRS publication 1212. And if you're in any doubt that this is lawful, if you have a look at the revocation procedure 2002 to 2026, it says in there, which is IRS code, as they have all these legislative codes that they follow, that once they are instructed by the holder in due course to transfer taxes that they have collected from the current payer, which is the investment bank, to the 98 series grant or trust, they have to execute that transfer in accordance with Rev Proc 2002 to 26. It actually confirms this in their own tax manuals. Next slide. So the next part of the journey along the credit energy recoupment, the tax recoupment, is that the IRS have something called IRS Trias 310. They have an electronic way of distributing the tax recoupments straight into the banks that have been set up, that we will set up for you if you want to do this, into the 98 series grant or trust. So the IRS have a procedure called IRS Trias 310, which reroutes the taxes that they've collected from the investment bank straight to the International Grantor Trust, this 98 series trust, and their system of doing that is called IRS Trias 310. And because of the way that we set it up, we have set up the trustee relationship with individual bank accounts for the receipt of this redirected tax to the 98 series grantor trust. It is completely compliant, ticks all the boxes for the IRS and ticks all the boxes for the banks themselves to receive the IRS Trias 310. Next slide. Now, the next component is that separate from and in addition to the 98 series grantor trust is we create for you what's called an asset fortress protocol. It is a second 98 series grantor trust. It sits on the monopoly board as another artificial player piece on the monopoly board, and it is going to receive the tax recoupments that have come into trust number 1. That's the trust that is filing the 1099 OID with the professional trustee. It is going to be the recoupments of taxes is going to be sent into the Asset Fortress Protocol, where your birth certificate construct is going to operate as the grantor and the trustee. So the birth certificate construct, the name on your bank card, passport, driving license, becomes the grantor of an Asset Fortress trust, and the trustee, meaning that you, the living man, woman, have absolute control over the Asset Fortress as an international trust that sits on the monopoly board independently of the person, the birth certificate construct, away from digital ID, away from taxes, away from all of those constraints that the government imposes, because it's an international trust individually operating on the monopoly board with no constraints against it. That trust, the Asset Fortress Protocol, is going to operate as your private treasury. You're going to receive Credit Energy tax recoupments into it from the first trust by transferring the first trust transfers to the second trust, the Asset Fortress being the second trust. You then, as the grantor and trustee, can use that Asset Fortress Protocol to spend, let's call it spending, send out new deposits from that trust, manage all of your banking affairs, pay off all your debts, pay off all your taxes, go and acquire whatever it is you want to acquire, and the acquisition and the discharge of debt and taxes is the issuance of new promises to pay from your Asset Fortress Protocol, new deposits onto the monopoly board that you can then recoup back in endless cycles. So you spend and recoup, spend and recoup. Because everything that leaves the Asset Fortress Protocol is the deposit of Credit Energy back on the board, and then you recoup it back in the way I've described in the earlier slides. So your Asset Fortress Protocol becomes your infinity treasury, sending energy out, recouping it back, sending energy out, receiving the recoupments back in never-ending cycles. It will avoid digital ID if you're concerned about that. So no tracking and tracing of your spending habits. It will also enable you to store actual assets like your property, your cars, your gold, your precious metals, your land. All of these different things can be transferred into it, and it becomes your Asset Fortress. But the main reason that you're going to set it up is because you want it to sit on the monopoly board individually so that you can use it to spend and recoup, spend and recoup. That's its main purpose. It can also hold all the assets, which is important, but that's not its main purpose. Its main purpose is to give you an individual, independent way of spending and recouping on the monopoly board that cannot be controlled by those that control the monopoly board itself. Next slide. Now, in order to clean up the agency, remember the living man woman is the agent for the birth certificate construct. At the moment, it's a bit messy. What you've got is you've got the living man woman using the birth certificate construct and operating the birth certificate construct as its agent under what's called it's the executor. De son tort is the Latin name for it. Executor, which means that, an executor of an estate, because the birth certificate construct is viewed on the monopoly board as an estate. It's like a trust. The agent for it is operating it as its executor de son tort, meaning it's using it, but it's not using it appropriately because it's using the name that's been put on the birth certificate, the family surname, and it's using that name as if that name were the living man woman. It's a bit messy. The living man woman is actually holding out that name. Holding out is a term in the law, as if it were them. It's not them. It's a separate birth certificate construct that needs to be cleaned up in order for you to elevate its status. So what the Envoy protocol does, and there's a whole presentation on this on the ROS Media platform. There's documents that explain it all in the Ecclesia Law Institute library. The very, very high level version of this is the Envoy protocol enables the living man woman to clean up the use of the birth certificate construct. It doesn't sever the ties of it. It just cleans up its use. You don't want to get rid of the birth certificate construct. You just want to clean it up. That is done within the Envoy protocol. The living man woman becomes the what's called the occupant of the office of the general executor. So remember that the birth certificate construct is an artificial construct. It is an estate. It needs an executor because the estate is dead. It's an artificial construct. It has no life. So the living man woman is the agent for it, can occupy the office of the general executor, clean up its use, make it more powerful, give more control over it to the living man woman. That's what the Envoy protocol does. It also makes the living man woman an envoy for a ministry. Now we don't do religion here. We're not doing religious scripture and all that kind of thing. A ministry is just an entity that has a belief system. The Republic of Old Souls believes in being peaceful, operating as a creditor to recoup credit energy, and basically operating with integrity and honor. That is the religious belief of the Republic of Old Souls. It's not about scriptures. It's not about, texts from many centuries ago. It's got nothing to do with conventional religion. It's to do with operating on the monopoly board with honor, with integrity as the creditor, operating and playing the game of Monopoly using advanced moves that I'm showing you some of those today. That is what you become, an envoy for that belief system. And that makes your status, elevates it up on the Monopoly Board of Commerce. Next slide. So you've basically got a choice. Everyone out there has got a choice. You can carry on transferring your human energy onto the Monopoly board and never recouping it, and having to generate more and more and more by economic activity, working at your job, running your business, trading something, doing something to generate more and more and more and putting more and more energy on the board. Or you can recoup the credit energy, which is the taxes on, because the nominees on the board are using your energy, that's the investment banks, spend and recoup their energy and take a very, very different pathway going forward, where you do not need a job, you do not need to run a business unless you love your job, love your business. I'm not saying you have to give them up. You do whatever you want to do, whatever you need to do. But this, if you recoup all of that signature energy that you put on the board since 18, that is a life-changing event. That's like winning the lottery, not just once, because you spend it and then recoup it back. So it's like winning the lottery every single year, doing it perfectly lawfully, exactly how the Monopoly board should be played, that nobody's ever showed you the rules for up until now, unless you've been on one of my previous webinars. Next slide. And this is really the life-changing aspect of it. It's not like you've just got one lottery ticket and you've cashed it in and spent all the lottery winnings, and then you never get that lottery win back again. You will be able to spend and recoup from your asset fortress protocol every single year. You can add to it, of course you can, by your earnings, your profits in your business. You can add to it, you can increase it, but you'll probably find for most people that we have got in our membership, the amount of signature credit recoupment that they are qualifying for is enough to see them through for the rest of their life. They don't have to add to it in most cases that we've looked at so far. Next slide. So we're up to questions.
We sure are. So we've had a plethora of questions in the chat. I want to say, guys, thank you for the interaction in the chat. It's been I've been struggling to keep up with you all, but I've done my very best. And what I've done is I've also written down any of the questions that have been in the chat that I haven't replied to, because what Ian and I do moving forwards from a Saturday webinar, early part of the following week, so either Monday or Tuesday of this coming week, we will be shooting a webinar Q&A based on all your questions from registration and anything that you've put in the chat today. So if I haven't answered your question, do not worry. We will do that on a separate video early part of next week, and we'll leave no stone unturned there, okay? So let's go through the 7 top questions. First one, Ian, how can I stop acting as a pauper and start operating as a master on the board?
Well, the first thing that you need to do is understand and comprehend that it's just a game. It's an artificial game. I call it Monopoly because that's exactly why Monopoly was introduced, the game Monopoly. It's a bit of a piss take, really, because they're actually selling it to us as a game, but it's what we're all doing without realizing it. When you play Monopoly, you've got to know the rules. Most of us were never taught the rules. We thought the game of Monopoly was work hard, set up a business, buy and sell something to make a profit, and then acquire assets and then, you know, do that for 40, 50 years and then retire. That's the game that we were sold, most of us, if not all of us, right? So we played the game that way. That's the way our parents played it. That's the way everybody around us is playing the game. But just imagine if at the age of 18, you went to a week's course on exactly what I've just explained to you, where you could operate a structure, as I've explained on this webinar, and you could create some economic activity so that you've got something to recoup. And then from age 20, you could just be spending and recouping what you'd already created over the first few years. What a different game you would have been playing. I'm not saying you would have given up at 20. You might have carried on with your job and your business until mid-30s because you wanted to build up more and more. But just imagine what you could have done if you could have put this structure I've explained today in place many years ago. Your game of Monopoly would have been so different. I know mine would have been, I mean, Andy, your game, everybody's game would have been a completely different. Yeah?
I know we've all had our roller coaster rides over the years. You know, Ian and I are a similar age. I'm 56. You're what, 60? And, you know, so you think about that. I've got 38 years worth of unclaimed taxes owed back to me and my family. And for many of those years, we've struggled, like I'm sure many of you have. So, yeah, well, I think the phrase of this being a game changer is very apt for people.
Yeah. So the answer to the question is, first of all, you need to really comprehend what is going on with this game of Monopoly. And then you need to play it differently. And you need to play it with the guidance that we bring, because we've been studying this for years and we know how it works. And we can facilitate all the difficult parts that I've explained. We can facilitate all of those to make it as easy as possible for you to play the game of Monopoly with advanced moves, rather than the moves that you've learned, as I learned and we all learned, that weren't actually telling us how the game really worked. And that's where the deception is. We've all been playing a game not really with the advanced moves weren't even known to us. We've all been playing it with one hand tied behind our back.
Perfect. Okay, next question, Ian. does separation of the living soul from the fiction allow asset use without debt liability? Don't think they're quite understanding.
No. So, this is a common misunderstanding that a lot of people say, well, I'm a living man, woman, I don't have to be responsible for the birth certificate construct. I'm going to leave that to one side and forget and ignore anything that happens with that birth certificate construct because I'm not that. I'm separate from it. Well, the problem is that those that run the board, they tracked everybody from the moment your mum and dad signed up for the birth certificate registration. You were entered into a trap whether you liked it or not, because you became the agent for that birth certificate construct. And there's not a lot you can do about it, apart from clean it up, as I explained on the Envoy protocol. But you actually want it because if you were able to, and there are people out there who say that you can sever the ties, I don't believe it, and I don't agree that you can sever agency. You can't rescind agency. You can only correct agency. You can't rescind it. So there's many people out there who believe that you can actually sever it and then you don't have to be liable for anything that the birth certificate construct does. Well, my simple pushback on that is, if that were the case, how is it that there's millions of people in jail at the moment? If you could just fill in some forms and send them somewhere and sever the tie between the living man, woman, and the birth certificate construct, nobody would be in jail. Because it's only the birth certificate construct that is charged with a crime or a mortgage foreclosure or a tax bill or anything else. If it was as easy as just severing the tie, and nearly everybody would be doing it, wouldn't they? But you actually want that agency in place, because without the agency, you can't transfer the credit energy onto the monopoly board and therefore can't recoup it. Historically, you want that agency in place. Because if it wasn't there, none of this credit energy could be recouped back as taxes.
Okay. Next question is it possible to recoup millions in credit energy since the age of majority?
Well, the IRS have a limitation. Remember I said we could set up a new grantor trust, 98 series. That trust is going to file the tax forms 1099 OID. A professional tax preparer is going to file those. Knowing how much is possible to recoup in advance, because all of those tracks and traces through our algorithmic system is being done. The limit on the tax preparer's software is $10 million. Per trust. So if you're out there with a lot more than $10 million that you have put your energy on the monopoly board, if you want to recoup more than 10 million, it is possible to do it by setting up multiple grantor trusts. So you'd have 2 or 3. The limit on each individual one is $10 million. By the way, a lot of people, we've been doing this for quite some time. A lot of people view millions as if it is a huge amount of open brackets, closed brackets money. It's not. It's just ledgers. It's just ledgers on a computer system. There's no money of substance. So it doesn't really matter what the number is that's being recouped. It's more about whether it qualifies. Has all the checks and balances, ticked all the right boxes for the recoupment itself to qualify. It doesn't really matter about the value of the recoupment. It matters about whether it's compliantly being done, not the value of it. So the answer to the question is yes.
Okay. And if you go to ROS Media, go to our platform, rosmediaplatform.com. So that's rosmediaplatform.com. There is an interview that I've done on there with another fellow member of the team here, Ange, where we actually show you some tax transcript evidence there. some of those tax transcripts are, up into the 20 million marker, 25, 26, 27 million per filing. So if you want to see evidence of that, go there. It's about 20 minutes long. I think you'll find that quite insightful. Next question, Ian, is can the asset fortress hold property beyond the reach of state registries?
Well, that's quite a complex question without knowing the individual circumstances. The answer is possibly, because it depends how the property is registered already. I haven't explained this because it's not that relevant to this presentation. But when you look at property, shockingly, because it is a shock when you first realize this, there's no living man or woman on the planet today outside of clergymen and maybe some monks that actually own property, the legal title to the property, the real ownership of the property. 1933, a mortgage is taken out over the entire monopoly board, and that mortgage puts the legal title in the hands of the creditors. That's the banking creditors. So when people say, I own a house, when they're talking about what they've got or what they think they've got, what they actually have is the equitable title to use the house. So they have the use of the house and they can sell the equitable title to others, but they don't actually own the house or the land that it sits on, because the ownership of the land and the house itself belongs to the entity, which is the banking entities. And we could go into this as a whole webinar on its own right. It's basically the registration of the legal title is not with the homeowner or the property, the perceived property owner. The perceived property owner has equitable title, the use of the asset, the same as the use of the car. The car is not owned by the living man, woman. That car, vehicle, truck, whatever it is owned by the state because it's registered there, which is why they tax it. Because anything that's registered to the state enables the state to tax it, because it's just being used. It's being rented effectively by the user. The user is the birth certificate construct. So can the asset fortress hold property? Yes, if there is no legal title, it's already pre-existingly registered to the state. There might be a way of untangling that. And if so, then the answer is yes. But in most cases, it's very difficult. Some church land, there is actually the title belongs to the church, the legal title. That's why I said clergymen and monks might actually own property, but not very many other people actually own anything at all. The legal title.
Okay. So next question is, do corrective 1099 OID filings redirect withheld taxes to a private treasury?
Well, the 1099 OID itself doesn't redirect it. What happens is it corrects the record. So you've got an investment bank, or many of them, you may have many in your portfolio, that are operating as nominees for you, the living. And when you set up a 98 series grant or trust, and when the tax license holder, tax preparer license holder files in the 1099 OID, what it does is it moves the nominee from being the investment bank to the 98 series grant or trust. Now that 98 series grant or trust is the nominee to receive the taxes back from the United States Treasury. So filing 1099 OID doesn't redirect the withhold taxes itself. What actually redirects the taxes is the tax return, because it's the combination of the 1099 OID. There's another tax form called a 1041, which is that the trust files to actually redirect the taxes to the grant or trust. The 1099 OID is a correction of who the holder in due course is, the entity that's holding that status as holder in due course and nominee becomes the grantor trust, but no tax rebate is ever going to go to that trust unless a 1041 tax filing is sent in at the right time in the process.
Okay. And the next one is, how does the Envoy protocol utilize CRSS to rescind agency to the state?
Well, that's a confused question, I think. It doesn't actually do that. It can't really do that. What it can do is it makes part of the process is it's making a declaration that cleans up some presumptions that the state had of the agency. It's cleaning up the agency. It's strengthening the use of the birth certificate construct through this office of the General Executor, but it doesn't rescind the agency. You don't want to rescind the agency. So it's a good question because it reveals a lot of people out there thinking they can rescind agency. They can, separate themselves from the birth certificate construct, or they can declare that they're, state national, or they're this, that, or the other, or they're under God's law and they don't have to comply with with the Caesar's legislative law that applies to the birth certificate construct. There's so many ideologies out there. I've written technical papers on why they're flawed because they don't understand that you cannot sever the agency. You can only clean it up.
Okay, and the last one, Ian, is, can the spend and recoupment cycle create a self-sustaining infinity loop?
Yeah, absolutely. Because a big part of this program is, if you have got, let's say, $1 million that you can recoup, just for round numbers, and then you went out and had you went out and you paid all your debts off, and you paid all your taxes, and you're now there debt free, but you've got no cash flow coming in. So in order to solve that, the next year you recoup back what you've just spent using common language to discharge the debts and the taxes in year one of this program. Year two, you're recouping back what you put out, the energy you put back on the board, and then you can recoup it again. So it's like it is an infinity cycle, and that's a big part of this program. You go from being a debt slave to being completely in charge of your game of Monopoly, and giving you the ability to play the game, but also to do other things in your life that you might have wanted to do, that you've never had the time or the budget to do them, because you've got to go and do that job. You've got to go and do that business. You've got to go and do whatever it is you're doing to generate, let's just call it income. There's no income, but let's just call it income. And that's the life-changing part of the infinity loop, is you can basically go and get your lottery ticket every year and cash it in.
Okay. Let's move on to the next slide, Ian. So before we go into next steps, we do actually have a poll. So I'm going to go live in the chat. You've all been very, very active in the chat, which is wonderful to see. And I've done my level best to answer your questions. Ones I haven't answered, I've written them down. So I've got a note at the side. I've been vigorously typing and copying, pasting your questions in there as well. So we'll get to those early part of next week. But right now, we have just one very simple poll. The way that this works, guys, is you'll see the poll on the screen, and you will have the ability to vote in the chat. And for voting, you simply need to put the number down. So you'll have three options. There's option 1, option 2, option 3. All you need to do is type a 1, a 2, or a 3 based on the answers to the question. And then you will see, as will we, the live results on the screen in terms of the percentages. So let's do that now. Not done this before, so we're going to do this for the very first time. And here is the poll, which is very simply, do you want to get started with the Monopoly Game Changer protocol? Type 1 in the chat if yes, I'm ready to get started. type 2 if no, I'm not ready to get started, and type 3 if I've already started my journey. We'll leave that for a few seconds. Got some fluctuating results coming in here, Ian. I'll leave it for a couple more seconds. All right, looks like we've got roughly 30% of people who are brand new and would like to get started on this, Ian. About 60% who have already started, which is amazing, and 9% that are not ready to start just yet, which is absolutely fine. Right, I'm going to give it 5 more seconds, guys, and then if we can stop voting, we can kind of collate the poll results together. I think we're about there now.
Yeah, well, very good.
All right.
So we've got around 90% who either are doing it or want to do it. So that's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. So next steps, guys. If you've got any further questions, okay, if you want to speak to a consultant, then this is the link that you want to be going to, okay? lvfree.click.tge. Once you get to that page, all you've got to do is pop your email address in where you see email, click on the book a call button, and that'll take you straight through to a booking page. Pick a day, pick a time that works for you. The day and the times that you choose are available on the consultant's calendars, so you know that they have that availability, and you'll get a booking straight into the calendar, and you'll be able to jump on a Zoom call or something of that nature, a video-based call, where you can actually talk to a consultant about your own personal journey and how the Monopoly Game Changer protocol would work for you. So that's your next steps. If you're one of those 38% who said you were ready, or 39% who said you were ready to get started.
Can we put that in the chat, Andy? Is that possible to paste that into the chat? Rather than
I can indeed. Yeah, let me just go back into the chat very quickly. And what I'm going to do, guys, is I will put in the link for you. So it's lvfree.click/TGE. I've just put that in the chat for you now, guys. And that will go out on the chat here, but it will also go out onto the comments on social media if you're watching us on Facebook or you're watching us on X or Instagram or wherever you're watching us, okay? So hopefully you can see that, lvfree.click.tge, all right? So that's there in the chat for you to grab. Book a call with a consultant, okay? Spaces are limited, so I would do that quickly if you can, because we've had well over 1,000 people that registered for this particular webinar. I've had a huge amount of interest in this. And obviously our consultants have lives and have families and have things that they also want to do themselves aside from booking calls with people. So get onto the calendar as quick as you can. And then in terms of next steps from here, again, we've got a bunch of links that you guys can also benefit from. We've got a bunch of handouts that we're going to be putting into the members area too. So in terms of the links that are available, you've seen the booking link. That's the top one there. We've also got a multitude of websites that you can visit. Don't want to overwhelm you with too much, but these are the typical links that you should have available to you either in the members area, or if you've been watching Ian and I's content, we often refer to many of these websites as well. So join those links, join the Telegram group if you can as well. We do live updates daily in the Telegram group. We'd love to have you in there. We've got a couple. We've got Winning at Monopoly, and we've also got the Advocate Telegram group if you are one of our advocates too. And then here are the handouts. Now, these will be available for you in the members area. So once we finish this webinar, this will then populate. That will get loaded into the members area. I know that we had a few comments in the chat about people saying, I'm so sorry, but I've got to leave now. Absolutely fine. Wherever you left off, you'll be able to go to the members area, watch the back end of that on the recording. And then all these handouts will be available for you as well. Okay. So we've got 9 in total to do with everything we've been discussing today. The Clifford Protocol, the Asset Fortress Protocol, Commerce Protocol is another one, and obviously the Monopoly Game Changer Protocol. So there's plenty in there for you to dig your teeth into between now and possibly when you have a call with a consultant, just so you can get a little bit more information before you have that conversation. And then invitation rewards. Do you want to go through this, Ian, or do you want me to go through this?
I'll go through it if you don't mind, because
Okay.
I'm very passionate about this. I know you are as well.
Indeed.
So when I created the community, a few years ago, I knew that we would grow through referrals, because this message is quite difficult to put out through conventional media channels, because a lot of it is shadow banned, and a lot of it is is constrained by algorithms that run marketing platforms and social media platforms. Not because there's anything wrong with it, just because those that control the monopoly board don't want you to be free. They want to keep you under their control agenda. So to me, it made absolute sense that the best way to get this to grow is through referrals. So we run an advocate program. So members who don't even need to be enrolled in the Monopoly Game Changer Protocol, they can still be an advocate. But we also offer another way that you can defray the cost of the Getting Started donation. Remember, we're a ministry. We don't charge fees. We're seeking donations to our ministry. So depending on what it is that how much credit energy you're looking to recoup, there will be a donation that fits that level of credit or tax recoupment. And if that's beyond your budget right now, if it were, what you can do is you can invite people to any of our webinars going forward, and everyone that you invite who comes and stays for at least 70% of the webinar will earn you £100 in your digital wallet to set off against the enrollment, that's the donation required to get this program started. So if you were like Andy, has a big social media following, if you had a social media following, you would be able to send out a link to the webinar, the forthcoming webinars, and those that come will earn you £100 to set off against the donation required to get started on this protocol. And in some cases, not in all, but in some cases, the amount of webinar referrals that you make could actually fund your entire enrollment. I'm expecting to see quite a few times that happening. It won't happen for everybody because not everybody's got a big social media network. But if you had the ability to send this invitation out to a larger group and do what you did, Andy, I mean, do you want to explain what you did? Because you've got a lot of interest in what you did.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you guys, I'm not, I know it might not seem that way, but I am not one for camera. I'm really not. I find this very uncomfortable. So first and foremost, I don't want anybody sitting there thinking, well, it's all right for Andy, it's all right for Ian, they're on camera all day long. Well, we get used to this because we go through, uncomfortable barriers that we know we need to go through. So I'm quite introvert as a person. And this is foreign territory to me. It really is. So that's the first thing I want you to know. But I've gotten over that barrier. Okay, so number one, I've made the effort to try and shoot videos, try and put content together, because I know how important this is. It's not just about recruitment and it's not a money thing for me. This is about my kids and my wife and my family. This is about the agenda that's coming. This is about what's the world going to be like when my kids grow up. And that scares me, or it did scare me. It doesn't now, but it used to. So I put that energy into the videos that I create, but I only do 60-second to 3-minute videos. I don't talk about this content in depth. I just give an elevator view of what it is that we do here, and then I invite people to take action. I'll ask them to comment in the chat. I'll ask them to like and share the video, and then I instruct them where to go, which is just a link in my bio on my profile page. And we've done that consistently now for a number of months. When we started, I had about 250 followers, I think, on TikTok. We have just shy of 60,000 followers now on TikTok. And that's my account. My wife also has an account. So consistency is key with this. You've got to post. You can't just put one video out and think it's going to work. It doesn't work like that. You need to keep consistently posting to reach people. And that is our goal. We want to reach as many people as we possibly can with this, because it is life-changing. And I feel behooved to do that, because I know that it's going to change my family's life, and I want that for other people. So I get over the fear, I get over the sort of the introvert nature that I am, and I do my level best to post videos as often as I can. Do I do it every day? No, I don't. Sometimes I fall off the wagon. Sometimes when the kids are off school and it's half term, I don't post anything for a week because we've got the kids at home. But I try and stay consistent with it. So just, probably a long way of saying it, but in brief, let's just wrap this up. 60 seconds to 2 to 3 minutes maximum. Doesn't need to be any more than that. Post consistently, something simple, put your heart into it, get over your fear, and just give people the instructions at the end of the video. And that is maybe what's brought some of you to today's webinar. You may have seen my content over the last 2 or 3 days, have responded to that. We put one video out, it got 160,000 views on TikTok. So it does work. If you're an advocate and you're watching this, I absolutely know it works, but it'll only work if you do it.
Yeah, and I guess if you don't have a TikTok presence, you can still just send out the invitation to people you know. So you don't have to have a TikTok or an Instagram, or you don't have to be into blogging or into social media promotions. You just may have your friends and your family and your co-workers that you know, or you may be part of a group. You may be part of a network that talks about something, does something. And that's all you need to do. These people don't need to enroll for you to earn the £100 reward. They just need to attend the webinar, any webinar going forward, and stay for 70% of the webinar. And I don't know of anybody who wouldn't be interested in these webinars. So, but then maybe I would say that. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but I still think a lot of people would be very interested in this subject. So,
yeah, for sure. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up, guys. In terms of Q&A, if you've got any additional questions, we will be sending you out a form. Okay, so there'll be a form that will come out where you can submit your questions. Once you've got that form, fill that in. We then collate all that together, okay? And that's when we do the Q&A. So the Q&A will take place early part of next week. In terms of where that form submission is going to come from, I know it says Simone here, but obviously I'm doing the webinar today. So I believe on the next slide, we do have an alternative email for you to be sending out to. So I'm going to put that in the chat as well. Okay, if you want to drop me an email at this address, and this includes, there's a person in the chat who is struggling in terms of booking a call because their phone number, I believe, is somewhere in Ireland and it's not accepting that in the booking form. So if you want to send me your details as well to this email address, so this is socialmedia@republicofoldsouls.com. So anybody that wants to ask questions and they want those questions answering, email your questions here. Okay, socialmedia@republicofoldsouls.com. I'll collate them all together. Give us some feedback as well, you know, on the webinar. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you indifferent? Did you think it was too long? It's always good for us to get feedback so we know how we can improve as well. So let me just put this in the chat, Ian. And then once we've got your questions, Ian and I will run a Q&A, which will be, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday of next week. You'll be able to find that on the ROS Media platform as well. So all your questions that you've submitted today in the chat, all the questions that you submit through the email address, we'll pick them all apart and we'll answer them all for you, okay? That's it, Ian. That's all I've got. Any final words before we wrap up?
Well, my final thoughts are that, you know, if you're very new to this, it will take a while for it to sink in. It's not unusual. You know, when you've been given a paradigm shift or information that causes a paradigm shift in your belief about how the world of commerce works, it can take a while. And what I would suggest is that you don't go in straight into ChatGPT and try and ask it, you know, can it comment on this, because it's been programmed to mislead you. As I tried out some months ago, putting my research papers into it, and it told me it wasn't permitted to tell me about this process. And when I asked why is it not permitted, it told me, basically kept repeating it wasn't permitted to tell me about the process, because I mean I'm an expert in it, so I know all about it. And I was just trying to validate it using ChatGPT, and then it closed my account because I'm not supposed to know what I know. So that might tell you a lot. So if you're going to go straight from here and put it straight into some sort of internet search or some kind of, you know, AI, be very careful, because the AIs have been programmed to mislead you to believe that this doesn't work. Well, we've got verified results. If you go on ROS Media channel, you've done interviews, Andy, with people that have had results. We've had many recoupments have been successful. We had 600 million last year of confirmed IRS tax recoupments. And you know, this isn't
mine, for the people that are on here. There's the physical copies. I know these are redacted, guys, and you probably can't see them very well, but this is my tax transcript and that is my wife's tax transcript. That is just one for each of us of many that we are yet to receive as well. So there's the physical proof. I share this on the video with Ange amongst probably 30 other examples running up into the $25 to $30 million marker as well.
So it's not a theory, it's very real, but the AI systems don't want you to know about it. They'll probably tell you that you get into difficulties doing it, but none of our members have ever had any difficulties. The only people who've had difficulties are people who've tried to do it through other mechanisms and methods, and they've had a great deal of difficulty because they don't understand how to do it correctly. We do, and it works. So that's my sort of roundup. Is if you want to really deeply understand it, read the research papers. Don't turn to AI or internet searches because they'll mislead you. If you want to ask very technical questions, I'm your man because I like technical. Ask them to Andy, and I'll answer them on probably on Tuesday when we do the Q&A. And we don't just do a webinar on this subject. We do a webinar on all different subjects. If you go into our webinar page, we have all of our recent webinars on there. I pick a problem and then I do a problem and solution webinar. There's all manner of problems on there and solutions. But this is our flagship. This basically is our flagship. And in my opinion, when we get to 500,000 envoys that are doing this, that's about the limit to it. We can't really grow any more than that. So if you want to be one of those 500,000, book your meeting in with one of our consultants, and soon, maybe even next week, you'll have access to the Ian Clifford avatar, and you may even be able to experience that on the meeting with the consultant, so you can ask it anything. And its library of information is vast, I can assure you.
Really excited about that as well. So, and we've had questions in the chat about, you know, and I get it, guys, you know, where am I at with my personal process? The avatar is going to be another game changer for that, because not only will it tell you where we're at as a nation, as an organization, but it will also tell you where you're at in your personal process live whenever you want to ask that question. So that is a real huge development here to try and give you the information that you're looking for. But for now, I wish you all the best for the day. Thank you for attending. Thank you for joining. We'll see you on the Q&A early part of next week. We'll be running that out, and that will go live on the ROS Media platform. You can join us live on that through social media as well, as many of you do, and listen to your questions being answered live, or you can watch the recording. And today's recording will be on the platform for you with the handouts as well, hopefully within the next few hours. So once again, have a great day. Thank you for watching. Book a call if you need to with one of the consultants if you're brand new to this and you want to get started. And we will see you on the next webinar.
Bye for now.